I guess if you could start off, either Andre or Amanda, by telling us a little bit about what you do at Hounslow Council regarding housing.
Uh, yes, so um, Amanda and I both run the Council's Delivering Quality Homes initiative, which is an initiative originally set up by the GLA that looks at ways how housing providers and organizations that deliver housing can essentially deliver the highest possible quality housing outcomes. Um, Amanda was involved with the project from the onset, so she's perhaps better placed to talk about sort of the inception of it and how it all came to be.
Um, yeah, so I could pick up from that. I guess the our involvement in housing kind of happened. The housing team happened organically. We aren't in the housing team, but we work closely with other departments, and it was kind of identified that there was a need for extra design support because the housing team were delivering a lot of homes. There was a target of delivering kind of corporate pledge of delivering, it was 1,000 homes. Um, and so they were commissioning architects to design and, contractors to build work for the first time for quite a while. So there was a need, firstly to kind of support the housing teams delivering this, but also to sort of improve the quality of design. And that was kind of our remit for getting involved with the teams to sort of support them, throughout the sort of early design process, to ensure that they get planning permission, that they're really looking for the right things. Um, I mean, it was kind of a two-way process between housing and planning. So I think planning kind of identified that the schemes were not achieving the sort of high quality design that they would like to see. So there was a little bit of a dynamic between the two teams, and then housing kind of recognizing that, okay, if we would need to get planning, then we need to improve the design of our homes and the quality of them. So that was kind of the background context for getting involved in the GLA DQH scheme. So that was our kind of our the planning team's initiative to get involved in it and kind of act as an extra kind of impetus to improve design quality and the quality of homes across the board. So we kind of signed up to that scheme or we applied to be on the scheme in 2021, I believe. And we were one of four teams who were successfully accepted onto the pilot, and the other pilot teams were housing associations, and actually they were mainly housing associations. So we were the only local authority on the pilot. And as part of the pilot, each of the teams had to sort of review the processes, their development processes for delivering homes, and that kind of spanned design, project management, the whole sort of delivery process. So we had to come up with an action plan that reviewed every aspect of this process and focus on specific areas of improvement. So that was kind of the picture and the sort of the aim of the DQH program, is to get development organizations to review their delivery and development practices with the aim of improving design quality and, well, quality overall and efficiency. Then we focused on the kind of the key things we wanted to focus on was kind of creating this vision document. It seemed to be the most sensible first step in improving housing quality overall. Is to set out our stall, and set out our vision as to kind of housing quality that we wanted to achieve as an organization. So that was kind of the first piece in achieving our kind of overall goals and our action plan.
Great.
Perhaps sort of a good thing to add here is that Amanda and I also work quite a bit in development management and spatial planning. So we review a lot of major and strategic schemes that come through the borough, not just the ones that we're delivering, but also that private developers are delivering. So essentially when they come in for planning, Amanda and I will review the design of schemes. So that gives us a good overview of what some of the sort of repeating problems are in the borough. What are sort of the key problems that need to be tackled via residential schemes. So that also allowed us to sort of build up a good knowledge base of what it is that housing should actually be delivering in Hounslow.
And for example, when you mentioned that kind of you even also assess the private, through the planning, the private developers, against what do you assess it? Do you assess it then to the kind of vision document you created, or is there kind of a more step-by-step assessment?
We do have sort of processes in place. We primarily assess it against policy, so national, London and local policy. The housing vision document that we prepared, so that's not a policy document, that's guidance, but it's guidance that we as an organization have signed up to. So the schemes we deliver follow that guidance. With private developers, because it's not policy, we can't make them, for lack of a better word, follow this vision. But what we do is we show it to them. We say, look, this is the level of quality that we've signed up for. This is the level of quality that we would like to see being built in our borough.
Okay. And kind of a bit what you were mentioning, Amanda, that you also get involved within the process with architects and developers. For example, in that case with the private developers, when they bring the project, has that already been talked through with you, or is this the first time you receive kind of that information?
When they come in for a pre-application meeting, no. Normally, the first pre-application meeting is the first time we will see a private development's design. We receive it in advance of the meeting, obviously, to review, but no, normally once they enter into a PPA agreement or once they book in a pre-application meeting, that's when we see private design for the first time.
Okay.
But it tends to be a journey, so it's not like we'll see the complete package the first time. It'll be the beginning stages, and there's plenty of time to sort of work with developers to get it to a point where we feel it's high quality design.
Okay. And so prior, what you were talking about the housing team before, that they were not achieving the housing quality that they wanted. What were some of the aspects of housing quality that was lacking, or that they wanted to improve or change?
I mean, on a basic level, it wasn't necessarily housing quality. Well, that was an issue, but it was just generally the sort of design and appearance of the buildings, and then very basic things like form, massing, and layout that were kind of issues. The sort of design, like window and elevation design, wasn't referencing the context, or it wasn't kind of achieving kind of high quality design criteria or ambitions. So kind of on a basic level, they were not very kind of elegant designs. But then there were also issues in relation to sort of not the size of rooms, but the layout of homes and the suitability for kind of families to live in flexibly, for furniture layouts, to sensible furniture layouts and things like that. Also sort of I'd say in particular in the public, not in the public realm, but sort of the sort of amenity spaces and the kind of communal areas, these were kind of quite an issue. There was generally a lot of parking. Perhaps the landscaping was kind of compromised by vehicles and car access and things like that. I'd just say that there was a lack of a kind of holistic look at these sites, how they were working for residents and building users, and how they kind of appeared in the street. And then, further in, there was like issues with the design quality, the materiality, the kind of, how pleasing the buildings were to look at as well. So there was like a range of issues with a lot of these schemes. I mean, I guess at a basic level, they were probably achieving, basic policy requirements in terms of like space standards and building regulations. But beyond that, they weren't kind of achieving sort of things that are set out in our policy, in our local plan policy documents in terms of character, appearance, amenity space, and then also in terms of the London Plan guidance as well, about the kind of quality of homes that are required to make safe, comfortable homes and good neighborhoods.
I don't know if you would agree, Amanda, but I feel almost like there's quite strong policy and quite strong building regulations when it comes to sort of the interior of a living space.
Yeah.
And then where most schemes start failing is when you zoom out, when you go into more of a macro level. So how are the communal spaces in the building faring? How are the buildings interfacing with the neighborhood? One that keeps coming up with our residences, other uses. So all these things sort of go beyond the immediate living space, are where the policy isn't as strong, and that's where there's wiggle room for development to perhaps be of a lower quality. We all rightly so focus on mold and damp and all these sort of more like technical things that are now quite well covered with building regulations. There's obviously a lot of old housing stock that has issues, but most of the new things coming forward have to abide by pretty strict regulations. And so where the schemes start failing in terms of design quality is once you step outside of your home, in my view.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think especially in the communal spaces inside a building as well, the sort of the design of the corridors, whether they have like windows in, how easy the building is to navigate, and the sort of sense of what happens when you step out of your front door. How do you see your neighbor? How do you interact with your neighbor? Is that set up in the way that the buildings are laid out? Where the stairs are located and things like that. Just kind of creating welcoming spaces right from the minute you see the building, walk up to the front door and to your home, or go through up the stairs and welcome you home. That's not really considered or covered by policy.
Yeah, and really creating vibrant mixed-use neighborhoods. I feel like there's a real issue in London where way too many developments are coming forward that are sort of almost exclusively residential, and that is a complaint that we heard from residents when we were engaging them whilst producing our housing quality vision document. I've heard that same sentiment echoed from officers at the GLA who were conducting their own engagement. It seems to be just sort of it seems to be an issue, and we see it with with private schemes that come across our desks. It'll rarely do people try to go beyond that residential aspect, and obviously there is sort of financial implications to that. I feel that investors probably feel more comfortable investing in residential rather than other uses, but it almost hinders the creation of sort of truly neighborhoods where people can truly form communities. You can't do that if everyone is just in their flats or houses or.
But I think it's also relating to planning policy. I guess it's sort of slightly off topic, but Andrej, the sort of there's no requirement to put in like a creche or a laundrette or these sort of spaces unless you're like replacing an existing use. There's no need to put in that kind of infrastructure. I mean, obviously, for GPs and like schools and things like that, there's guidance that's given about how, for however many X number of homes you've got to put in a new GP surgery. But there isn't for like, community centre. And lots of, when you look at like older housing estates 50 years ago, or like in the Barbican or whatever, they always have like these, neighborhood facilities as part of the master plan. It just seems like a sensible thing to do, to give people who are living there those amenities on their doorstep.
And when you were creating the housing quality kind of vision document, what was some of the research that you took into consideration to inform kind of these aspects?
So we underwent quite an extensive period of research and engagement. We engaged with various teams in the council. We had multiple sessions of resident engagement, sort of various different groups of residents were talked to. We normally started the sessions with very open questions. So I think one, for example, was what is a good quality home to you? We wanted the production of the document to be led by resident needs, in a sense. We didn't want to sort of put forward what we think is quality housing. We wanted it to start on their end. We also engaged a panel of experts. So the document was produced by two architectural practices, Archeo and DKCM, and they were quite good in how they structure these engagement sessions and having them so open-ended. And they also convened sort of a panel of technical experts to feed into it as well. So it was probably around 3 months altogether. I might be misremembering, but a lot of sort of really, really in-depth engagement that fed into it. And I expected residents to talk a lot about, damp or the size of their kitchen or, sort of like everyday internal things. There was a bit of that, but as I mentioned, they mostly sort of focus on, on the macro things, on their neighborhoods, on how they wanted, safe, well-lit streets. They wanted a lot more non-residential uses. They wanted more green space. It was almost like there was this need of to create neighborhoods that everyone can enjoy. That focusing to sort of shift there a lot of the time.
Since kind of the Delivering Homes scheme that started in 2021, have you seen any kind of notable shifts in what people want or people ask for? or do you feel that it has been quite constant?
Well, I think beyond the initial engagement that we've done, we haven't gone back to residents yet. We're sort of in the process of testing the vision document on some in-house schemes that are still in development. And I guess our plan is hopefully next is the POE, which is a post-occupancy evaluation, to really test then. And then I guess we'll be able to gauge whether these things that they've asked for are the same, whether they feel like these developments have achieved them, or think, things have changed. But yeah, we haven't, that kind of continuous process of talking to people and feeding it back into the vision document is sort of quite early on at the moment. I don't know if you'd agree, Andre.
Yes, obviously it takes years for any sort of scheme to be developed, so we've not yet seen any scheme through since we've adopted the vision document, but hopefully that should start happening soon, and then we can sort of reassess it and see where it's working, see where it's not. We are using it, we just haven't gotten to the finish line with any of the schemes. But yeah, in terms of sort of just hearing what people want, I don't feel like we've obviously not, we would not had any more sort of engagement sessions that were as intense as that period. But I don't feel like the sentiment has shifted significantly. We see things in terms of on the private development side where different things are proposed all the time. So, for example, we see a lot more build to rent at the moment. We see, you mentioned, or one of you mentioned healthcare. We're seeing more healthcare being proposed as part of developments. But I suspect that is more to do with sort of market trends rather than what residents are saying. I don't know.
Just to come back to your point about the research that we carried out, I mean, even prior to the document being launched, when we were writing the brief for it, we looked at other vision documents that other local authorities and housing associations had produced to sort of get a flavor of the things that they were saying, what they were focusing on, or that they were seeing was important. And there was a huge range, actually. Some were very prescriptive about things like front door colors or bricks or materials, they're almost like very like design guides. And then others were much looser, there were just like a few bullet points. So there was a real range. And I think that's why we decided to take the approach to do so much research and consultation as part of the project, because we really wanted it to be like Hounslow specific and to be surprised, as Andre said, by what people were saying. We didn't want to assume that this was important for residents or people in the borough. We wanted to find out really what were the key issues and make sure that that was like integrated into the principles of the document. So so that's why things like being surprised about the communal spaces, or the lack of green spaces, that was like part of the process. I think we didn't want to be prescriptive about what we thought were the important things.
There was one sort of, we have a development just off of our high street in Hounslow that was sort of highlighted as quite loved by our residents, and that surprised us. And funnily enough, we, not Amanda and me specifically, but other people on our team are producing another guidance document at the moment for public realm designs. And I participated in one of their engagement sessions. and this public space of the high street came up again as sort of really beloved. And it was interesting, picking up these things that you wouldn't think of if you don't live in that very area specifically. It's a very sort of generic, for lack of a better term, space, but people really loved how it was sort of new, felt safe. They liked some of the shops there, and it was sort of, the entire process was, discovering these things you wouldn't really think of because you don't live in that area. You wouldn't really think of, oh, people actually need that specific type of space here. And I think that sort of, that's a testament to how well the architectural team put together the engagement sessions and sort of ensured that they were really resident-led from the onset. I mean, I would have never posed the question, do you like this space? Because it wouldn't have even occurred to me as some sort of exceptional space.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And for your in-house schemes, can you tell me a little bit about how kind of the responsibilities are distributed and how you kind of relate to other departments and teams to get these schemes finished?
So in terms of the projects that we deliver as an organization, so Amanda and I, we sit on the spatial planning team, and our titles are Principal Urban Design Officer. So what we do is as mentioned, we run the Delivering Quality Homes initiative and the working group, and through that we provide advice to other officers who work on housing delivery. We sort of identify gaps in housing quality that need addressing. We identify sort of processes that could be improved, that could be changed. So this is all done sort of through this Delivering Quality Homes working group. And then in terms of sort of private development that is not delivered by us, so we essentially, the development management team engages with developers and they sort of enter into agreements with them, and the agreements are sort of a structured program of meetings and milestones and design reviews that are all sort of meant to get a proposal to a point where officers are happy to recommend it for approval. And where Amanda and I come in there is we come along for this journey, but as design experts. So we give advice, focused on design, and we sort of help steer the schemes towards, again, the best possible quality design outcome. So it's oftentimes a process that lasts years with private developers,
but our team, which Andrej's been talking about, is separate to the housing team. So the housing teams, they're like delivering homes in-house. They're like their own little development team, as acting as such. So they will act as their own sort of developers, taking schemes from planning all the way through to construction and handover on site. So the planning team's involvement in that team is only at the planning stage, really. You see what I mean? The sort of there are points throughout the delivery process, throughout the REBA stages, that the planning team will get involved in the housing delivery team's work. But the housing delivery team deliver developments on their own, so they will appoint architects, manage the process, submit for planning, appoint contractors, and so on. So they're kind of clients, really. And and both Andre and I have been involved in supporting them as clients to improve the design at various points. And yeah, the DQH is kind of an offshoot of that, began from that involvement.
And then do they feed back, the housing delivery team, do they feed back to you to kind of, give you a few kind of pointers for next round, or how does that then work?
Yeah, I guess in our working group, that's the sort of forum for officers from all teams, from planning, from housing delivery, from regen, and from other teams like asset management, who look at the maintenance and things like that, to kind of come together and discuss everything related to housing, the quality of these built units, and things for next things to take on board for next projects and things. That's the sort of idea.
And kind of thinking for a bit of what our theme was in the symposium that we had talked about, in kind of the future of housing standards, what are some of the main challenges that you see with the current standards within your schemes?
Probably energy and sustainability and environmental performance. I think achieving like really high performing buildings that go beyond building regulations is actually quite challenging in terms of budget, and as well in terms of kind of delivery and detailing and things like that. So achieving passive house on buildings of this scale is actually quite costly because of the amount of consultant involvement, the amount of increased sort of inspections and things that are required on site, and the sort of specification of appropriate, doors and windows in order to achieve, for example, passive houses is quite challenging. And I think that's something that's been identified. That's the first thing that comes to mind, Andre. I don't know if you can think of.
Yeah, we're thinking in terms of our schemes. Notice that delivering designs that how do I put this, that let's say have architectural features that go beyond just the minimum gets tricky. There's always a need to sort of value engineer out anything that's not absolutely essential, and that gets problematic. And for example, if you're in a conservation area, or if you're somewhere where there's design sensitivities, that can be an issue. That can become a planning problem. Then also just juggling the right type of density. Making all the numbers stack essentially can be a challenge, and getting it, getting to that sweet spot in terms of viability. Obviously not a money person, I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but I've seen like a few schemes where suddenly they're coming in sometimes even less dense because just the numbers stack up better in that instance. And I think that's probably again to do with how volatile the market has been. So.
Well, I think that's all my questions. I'm not sure if you want to add anything else about your work, Hounslow Council.
I don't think so. I think that's been pretty in depth.
Yeah, this was really useful.
Yeah, I think probably, like, if I just think from like a broader perspective, I was just thinking now about specifically the schemes we deliver. I think sort of in a macro perspective, everything that we're seeing come forward in Hounslow, I would say the sort of main two issues are getting the density right, and then it goes back to viability and the numbers stacking up, and getting the right mix of uses, really. That seems to be, besides energy, which Amanda has talked about, those seem to be sort of the two main issues that I feel are reoccurring, but different officers might have different perspectives.
Yeah, and also I think now the aspirations have improved, and that it's kind of recognized that, yeah, local authorities are all trying to achieve really high quality, high performing homes, but these are social homes. It is, the viability is kind of on these schemes is tough, but our development colleagues would say that it is hard to achieve all of these things that we want to in the current climate, like making sensible, good design doesn't have to be expensive, I think is the sort of, is, we have to remind ourselves that, but then that requires quite a lot of careful thought, a lot of collaboration right from the beginning of a project, so that mistakes are not made, because any mistakes or things that are missed out early on will cost a lot more later. So I think, yeah, that the pressures of like achieving high standards to these sort of local authority budgets and getting value for money is a real challenge. And it's not about expensive things like expensive brick or whatever. Sometimes it's just achieving like the fundamentals of like good layouts, good ventilation, good landscaping and things like that can even be challenging.
And it's also about sort of thinking about the long-term picture as well, thinking about running costs, thinking about the savings you could be making long-term if you just invest a little bit more in advance. And I think what our vision document does quite well is it has an entire segment, an entire chapter that sets out principles that talk about this. And I think that's a very difficult. It needs to almost be like a shift in how people think about housing delivery. It's sometimes it can be very difficult to sort of have that long view and yes, invest a bit more in advance, but you get savings further down the line. And I think our vision document sort of pushes schemes in that direction quite well.